All right, welcome back to Net to Net Podcast. This is our second episode of our NCAA podcast where I sit and talk about, review last week's play and preview to this week and give you my Heisman candidates through the first 3 weeks. So starting with last week, probably the biggest news out of the NCAA last week was Texas and Alabama game. Alabama, the number 3 ranked team in the country, and then Texas ranked number 11. And we saw an unbelievable game. We saw a lot of good things from Texas, not a whole lot of any issues of playing ball, both sides of the ball. Both teams look strong. They look like a top 5 team in this country. And we saw it today, or we saw it when they won against Bama, who the number 3 seed is, or 3 ranked in the nation. And we saw a big struggle from Jalen Milrose, who was 14 of 27, 255 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, which is kind of an underwhelming performance because he did not look good throughout the entire game. The offense struggled to get anything going. Defense looked a little underwhelming for the talent they had around, in the likes of Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid, McStreen, the likes of Jalen Keys. I know, yes, Jalen Keys is coming back from an injury, so is Malachi Moore, but you have those guys that are a lot of players on this roster that are top 100 rankings in the NFL prospects that are probably a few are projected within the top 25 to be drafted. And you have Nick Saban, an unbelievable coach, probably the best coach in college football. But Texas, just Steve Sarkisian with Quinn Ewers coming out and just kind of full throttle, winning by 10. Texas didn't step off the gas, and that was huge. So Alabama goes down, and we now see a shift in the playoff rankings that will come out soon. And you see Bama drop to, I believe, 10 in the rankings, in the most recent rankings, with Texas jumping all the way up to 4. And that's a huge jump from 11 to 4. So that's a huge shakeup in the power standings of the NCAA. Now we look over to the other games that happened during this week within the top 25. We saw Oregon take on Texas Tech going into Lubbock, Texas, to play the Texas Tech Raiders. And Oregon comes out 38-30 win. They kind of saved it to the last minute going through that whole game. Our offense, Oregon's offense looked somewhat strong for the most part. Bo Nix played very well, 32 of 44, 2 touchdowns, 359 yards. Couldn't really get the run game going. Most rushes yards we had was from Bo Nix, our quarterback, who ran 46 yards. Troy Franklin looks like a candidate, a dark horse to be drafted. He had 103 yards with a touchdown on 6 receptions, which is pretty good. But we bring in Dan Lanning to become kind of our new coach to help our defense. And we did see a lot of holes that haven't been really filled yet. We have some leaders returning, like Jeremy Bassa. We got Tysheem Johnson, Trini Jackson, the transfer. We brought in DJ Ungalela's brother, who's a 5-star. But we saw a lot of holes, especially in our linebacker core, because we did lose Justin Flau. We did lose Noah Sewell. We lost DJ Johnson as an edge rusher, so we're looking I wouldn't say Oregon's in a rebuild, but they've reloaded. But it's a lot of reloading inexperience, which we lost that in those guys leaving. Um, but Texas Tech, don't get me wrong, Texas Tech look good. Tyler Slaw, the former Oregon quarterback, 3 touchdowns for 282 yards, 24-40, and he also rushed for 100 yards and a touchdown. But he did throw 3 interceptions. 2 of them were kind of forced. He tried to force it into double coverage, and then the last interception out of the last game was just a heave, and we picked it off. We picked it off at the end to seal the game, but Texas Tech almost beat Oregon, and they almost gave them a run for money. So Texas Tech, they're not a bad team. Yes, they're 0-2. They've kind of had some, I would say, unlucky losses. They lost the first week to Wyoming in overtime by, I think, 7 or less, and then come out and lose by 8 last game. And actually, Oregon, fun fact, Oregon is the highest ranked team to come in since Nebraska was ranked number 1. Like, I think it was in 1987, I believe. But that's huge. Another game that I want to target is the Texas A&M game, ranked 23rd in the country, go into Miami and get beat. Texas A&M did not look good, and you're talking about Texas A&M that for the last few years has bringing in 5-star after 5-star after 5-star, and then it's not producing on the field, which is concerning enough because you're Texas A&M, you're in a Power 5 conference, you're a big dog in the SEC, but you're bringing all these 5-stars in, and you're not producing on the field, which is concerning to a team when you're putting a lot into your program. And losing to Miami, yeah, don't get me wrong, Miami's a good team. They have Mario Cristobal, who I like a lot, but you're Texas A&M, you should be beating them. But like I said, they lost 33-48. Texas A&M just did not look good. They struggled in the passing game. Connor Weigman struggled, 2 interceptions. They really had one target, and it was Evan Stewart. He had 142 yards on 11 receptions. He was his security blanket to go to, but other than that, the defense didn't really show that they are a top 25 team. Another game to look at is Notre Dame. Sam Hartman continuing his push for the Heisman. He ended with 4 touchdowns again, 15 of 24 for 286 yards. And then you have Audric Estime putting in another performance with 2 touchdowns for 134 yards. And then you also have Holden Stace, the receiver, 115 yards on 4 receptions for 2 touchdowns. Notre Dame looks like a threatened. They were ranked number 10 last week. They are now, I believe, number 9. They moved up 1 spot in the rankings, which is really good for them because I think they're a dark horse to make the college football playoffs. Yes, they don't play in the conference; they're in the independent, but I think they're a good enough team to compete with some of these guys. And I think this year there's not really other than outside of Georgia, there's not really a consensus team to win the national championship. And even giving that to Georgia slightly, they really haven't played anyone yet. So once Georgia starts playing teams in their conference, I think it will change because they played, I believe, Ball State, easily beat them last week, 45-3, and then the first week they go out and smack. I believe it was, I can't even remember. They go out and just pummel whoever they play. Oh, sorry, they played Tennessee Martin. So they really I would say their biggest test is South Carolina on the 16th. At 12:30 p.m. West Coast time. I think Spencer Rattler and those boys at the Gamecocks, they've looked pretty good so far this season. I could see them putting up a fight against Georgia, but also I could see them getting killed because it is Georgia. But outside of Georgia, we don't really see anything else. And then the last team to talk about last week that's big notable is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State Buckeyes started off slow again, like they usually do for the last week as well. They couldn't get anything going, and then they started clicking on all cylinders, and they beat Youngstown 35-7, but they still have some growing pains. And like I mentioned, they give me 2014 vibes of new quarterbacks starting off slow, and then they go on kind of that run. I'm not comparing them to the 2014 team because that team was unbelievable and insane, but you get similar vibes and similar things from them that you see here. A new quarterback starting slow, and then they start getting hot later on in the season. And then actually the last team, sorry I said the last team. The last team I want to focus on is the Washington Wisconsin game. That was a good game. Washington 2-0 start the season. Now Wisconsin's 1-1. Wisconsin was ranked number 19. I said Wisconsin probably has one of the best running backs in the country in Braylon Allen, but he was barely used. They contained him 7 rushes for 20 yards. That's pretty insane. Who's arguably one of the best running backs in the country last year. But I got to give props to Cameron Ward. From Washington State, he looked very good. 20 of 32, 212 yards with 2 touchdowns, and then 43 rushing yards. Washington State just overpowered them on the defense side and on the offense, and we saw that Cameron Ward he can throw it, but he also can get out of the pocket and create those plays that you need as a quarterback to keep the drive alive. And you see with his progressions, if you watch him, he looks good for the check down. If it's not there, then he's taken off, because usually by the time you try to go through your reads, they're most likely going to be covered, and he's not going to hit his targets, which then he just takes off running and creates that open space, which is incredible. Now, previewing to week 3, we have some big games within the top 25 and outside the top 25. So we have my team, Cincinnati, playing Miami at Nippert, which is going to be cool. Cincinnati's look pretty good, 2-0. Started seeing Emory Jones looks pretty good. Last year we played them, we beat them 38-17. I don't have any issues. I think Cincinnati will easily win that. But then Oregon going forwards. Oregon plays Hawaii. I think it's going to be an easy win for Oregon. I don't see any troubles with having troubles, but you never know in college football. Same with Ohio State playing Western Kentucky. I expect a win out of Ohio State, who's ranked 6th. They dropped in the rankings again, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But other than that, notable games to look out for within the top 25. I would probably say my most interesting game is looking at how Alabama does with their new quarterback starting. Tyler Buchner will be starting over Jalen Milroe. The offensive coordinator was at Notre Dame last year, which Tyler Buchner played there. So we'll see how that goes. It's more of a pocket passer, I believe. He lost. Everybody thought he would be a shoo-in to win the job, but he lost it to Jalen Milroe. So it'll be interesting to see when he comes in. Milroe has been struggling. Milroe has 2 interceptions with 2 touchdowns last week, and he only completed 51.9 passes and was sacked 5 times against Texas, which Buchner can probably bring maybe something more of a punch to the team. So it'll be interesting to see. And then probably outside of that will be how Washington and Michigan State do. It's Michigan State is playing Washington, who's number 8 in the country, and it will be it's the game that Mel Tucker will not be coaching due to his suspension, which is due to the sexual assault and the sexual harassment claims. So it'll be interesting. But it looks like Mark D'Antoni, the former Michigan State coach, is coming back to coach as an interim, which will be pretty exciting, I think, because he's returning back. So for Michigan State, it's someone that is familiar with the system, familiar with the team, familiar with the school, so no issue there. And then, so that should be interesting. But Washington's a really good school. Pac-12 is representing this year. They have 8 ranked teams in the top 25, which is more than the second most with 4. So that's pretty good. And then we look at Colorado State, the rivalry game, the team of Colorado, who's that team, and honestly, Colorado with Deion Sanders, with those boys out there, with Shadori Sanders, you got Travis Hunter playing both sides of the ball. You got actually Xavier Weaver, who's one of my favorite receivers to watch in the um, college football. He's very dynamic. He can get downfield. He's quick. He can jump, and you just throw it up, and he gets it. Colorado can make a play this year. They're looking pretty good. So going forwards with talking about the top 25, like I mentioned, there's so many Pac-12 teams in the top 25, which is literally insane. You have USC, you have Washington, you have Oregon and Utah, you have Oregon State, Colorado, and UCLA, um, and Washington State, and one other I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But that is just so many, 8 in the top 25, and then probably the most notable thing other than that is Texas jumping from 4 to 11, from 11 to 4 after their win against Bama, and Bama dropping from 3 to 10. So pretty much Alabama is now eliminated from the college football playoff contention with that loss. And then Texas 2-0. Michigan still stays at second behind Georgia, and Florida State's at 3. And they moved up from 4 to 3. Michigan and Georgia stayed the same, like I mentioned. USC jumped from 6 to 5, with Ohio State dropping from 5 to 6. Just because USC has just been unbelievable. Caleb Williams, he is still there to make that Heisman push. And speaking of Heisman, if you look at it, Caleb Williams is one of the best right now in the country. He has so far through 3 games, he's only been sacked 3 times. He has about 878 yards, with a percentage of 77.5% accuracy, and he has 12 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Yes, they haven't played the best competition, but that's still insane for a quarterback like that. And then you have Shadori Sanders, who's also making a case for the Heisman running. He's already at 903 yards on 77.5 passing completion. He's got 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but he has been sacked 11 times, which is occurring because is not uncommon because he does run a lot. He does try to create out of the pocket, and the offensive line is very young. And then you have one of my dark horses. You have Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman is unbelievable this year. Transferring to Notre Dame, he's already got 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's only been sacked 4 times, 731 yards with a completion passing of 75%. So he is very accurate with the ball. He knows he's very smart. That's why he's still there. He's making a lot of progress from when he transferred from Wake Forest to Notre Dame, which fits him because he's at I think, a better school. And then there's a lot of guys that I think are shooing. I think the top 2 obviously are Caleb Williams and Sam Hartman at 1 and 2. I would have said it's hard to pick anyone with this award outside the quarterback role because the quarterback is pretty much a quarterback's award, and you see that throughout all sports. And we talk about in soccer with the Ballon d'Or, you don't really see goalies win. It's usually either midfielders or forwards, and then we talk about in the usually in that football MVP in the NFL, it's quarterbacks. Usually, you rarely see a receiver, or running back, or a defensive player ever win it. So, in certain ways, this is a quarterback's role. Outside the quarterback role, my going into the season was going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., but with everything that's going on at Ohio State right now, with how slow they're starting, not getting a lot of looks, I don't see him squeezing back in. It will take a lot, I think, but he did put up another 100 yards with a touchdown, or I believe 2 touchdowns, which is good. But I feel like you have probably better players, like, for example, Quinn Ewers, who is, I think, a legitimate chance. I think outside Cameron Ward has put up numbers that aren't as flashy, but he can get the job done. Just he's looking inside, but you have Sam Hart, who I said 75 completions over and averages over 11 yards is insane. He's on pace for 3,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, which is also insane. And you forget he hasn't done an interception yet, so he definitely he's. I feel like he's always in the Heisman running. And then he also has the best running back in the nation right now, rushing leader wise, Audric Estime, who I'm high on, who I'm big on. He's a very elusive back. I think um, Notre Dame somewhat produces good running backs they have in the past. And then, like I said, Michael Penix Jr., who's still there for Washington State. They're number 8 in the country. Wouldn't be that without him. He's pretty good. The transfer from Indiana. So let's see how he does against Michigan State. He's he's no, he's not afraid of Michigan State. He's familiar with them before he played with them at Indiana, which helps a lot because he knows that team and the system. And then through 2 games, he's got 8 touchdowns for 859 yards. And the only thing he's threw 1 pick, but he did a second straight over 400 yards, which is insane for Washington. He also had 3 touchdowns, and he was very accurate with the ball. So watch him to be up there in the conversation. And then I mentioned Shadori Sanders. Colorado, what they're doing out there is insane. And everybody's like, oh, would he be doing this if Dion wasn't the coach, if his dad wasn't coaching Colorado? We never know. But we saw him at Jackson State last year, and he put up numbers. And now we're seeing him at Colorado put up numbers too. This Colorado team, then like Dion said on Pat McAfee's show, um, they're only 6 or 7 guys away from competing for national championship, which in hindsight, maybe not. It's just a lot. They've done a lot through the transfer portal, yes, so they have the experience, but a lot of their trying to recruit is young and inexperienced, which I just don't think they can compete with the likes of a Georgia or Texas right now, or if Bama's on their day, a Bama team. Um, Number 2, Quinn Ewers is obviously up there. He just beat the number 3 team in the country and passed for 349 yards and 3 touchdowns on 24 of 38 passing, which is insane against a good Bama defense. But they just did not look the same. Like I mentioned, Kool-Aid Extreme, Dallas Turner, they didn't step up. They have to step up. Yes, you lose Henry Tokatoa. You lose Will Anderson. You lose Brian Branch and Jordan Battle, your leaders on the defense. So that means your guys that are still there have to step up. Like, yes, you're dealing with injuries with your cornerbacks, but someone has to step up. Yes, you lose your offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien, to the Patriots. Can't you have to replace that? Yes, Jalen Milrows is not a Bryce Young, not a Mac Jones, not a Tua Tagovailoa, not a Jalen Hurts, but Tyler Buckner can come in and kind of ride the ship. And he's used the former offense coordinator that was at Notre Dame is now at Bama. So this should help that transition because Tyler Buckner was good last year. He just lost his spot this year because Sam Hartman came in. And Sam Hartman obviously is one of my favorites to win the Heisman. I don't think he's getting enough looks. And then you have the number one, probably the future number 1 pick in Caleb Williams. Through 3 games, he has avoided any interceptions, just like Sam Hartman, but he has 12 touchdowns, and he's looked pretty good. He's averaging 12.5 yards per attempt, and he's really not thrown the ball a ton, but he's still one of the most top passers in the nation in the category. He's only 3 for 878 yards. And he's probably shooing for the number 1 pick, depending on if he decides to declare for the draft. But if you kind of look at it, 4 of the players that I mentioned in my Heisman, and then adding Cam Ward, 5 actually, and then I like Bo Nix within the top 10. A lot. If you look at it, a lot of the best quarterbacks right now are in the Pac-12, and it's kind of funny because the Pac-12 isn't going to be there next year. But you look at the likes of Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., Cameron Ward, Bo Nix, just to name a few, Shadori Sanders. You have really good quarterbacks at most teams in Oregon. I didn't even mention at Oregon State, DJ Ungolele, who struggled at Clemson last year, and now he's 2-0 against with Oregon State. you have the likes of so many talented quarterbacks, and they're doing good. And I've even talked about Cameron Rising hasn't even played. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country for Utah. He's come back from that injury, like I mentioned. And then you have the likes of UCLA quarterback. Yes, they don't have DTR anymore, but they do have Dante Moore, who actually he was a commit to Oregon before he decided to um, change and go to UCLA, which he honestly hasn't looked bad. He has 5 touchdowns, 1 interception for 433 yards on 61.5 completion percentage. It's not the same numbers that you would get from DTR, Dorrell, Robinson, Thompson, but you still get something from him. He's not bad. And then, like I mentioned, DJ Ungalele, who is now at Oregon. He's got 5 touchdowns for about 346 yards. The team is 2-0. Yes, they haven't really played anyone good, but you really don't play anyone good within the first 2-3 weeks, except for some of those teams that schedule those games, like we saw LSU versus Florida State, and we saw Bama versus Texas. Which, speaking of Florida State, I would like to say Jordan Travis is also one of my dark horses for the Heisman. He's 6 touchdowns, 1 interception for 517 on 63.3 passing yards, which people don't give him a lot of credit because he's at Florida State. He's got weapons around him like Trey Benson, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson. But Jordan Travis looked good against LSU. He came out firing. He looked a step slow, but throughout the game, he just looked more and more comfortable, which I am, which I like, and I like to see that as a quarterback. He's learning through his mistakes and being able to produce when the game matters. And then going back to the top 25, so teams that I would watch out for is Ohio State for one, just because yes, Ohio State is one of the Power Five teams. Yes, they should be fine, but we could see a slip up here because I haven't seen that much consistency from them through 2 games. Maybe they flipped a switch this week, but there's a lot that I don't like and a lot that needs improving. Yes, the defense looks good, but the offense looks like they took a step back. Yes, they did lose a lot of their offensive line. Yes, they lost a lot of their skill players, but not as much as their skill players did. They only really lost Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then pretty much their offensive line and DeJuan Jones and Luke Wampler. But you still have two of the best receiver cores in college football in Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, Emeka Ubakamba. You still have G. Scott at tight end. You have Mine Williams. You have Kate Stuver. You have Travion Henderson. Your quarterback is struggling, which I don't know if that's the offensive coordinator, if that's Ryan Day making those calls, but the defense looks solid. I like the Eichenberg and Stills Chambers are still there. You have JT Tulamalu. You have Latham Ransom, who was banged up last week. Cody Simons is still there. So you have a decent team on the defense side. Jack Sawyer's taking that next step to replace Zach Harris and all those boys that lost on the defensive side. Like they did lose, yes, a lot of defensive players, but you're still Ohio State. You have one of the best recruiting classes in the country. They just need to figure out their issues, and they'll be fine. I think throughout the season, their biggest test, I believe, this season will be Notre Dame on the 23rd of September, and then pretty much depending on how good Wisconsin is, and then Michigan at the end of the season. They should be a shoo-in for the top if they can beat Michigan this year. I know Ryan Day struggled against them, and people are like Ryan Day should be out, which is not the case. Ryan Day is one of the best coaches in college football, and I mentioned that last week. We talked about his recruiting class. We talked about his record. We talked about his only 2 losses in the conference have came to Michigan, which is insane. But there's so much to watch for this season, and there's not like a favorite. I like some of the teams outside. I like Tennessee outside the top 10. LSU's, if they can turn it around, I know they're pretty much eliminated from the college football playoffs because they're 1-1. But depending on how it shakes up, you could have a 1-loss team in college football playoffs. We've seen it before. if they make it all the way to their championship game. Shocking thing, Duke 2-0. Duke and North Carolina are ranked, representing the ACC, which is cool. Duke got ranked ever since they beat Clemson on week 1, and then they smacked Lafayette. So they have a decent team. Their biggest test will be Notre Dame on September 30th, which will be an interesting game. And then they play Florida State on the 21st and North Carolina on the 11th of November. So that will be interesting to watch. And then you have North Carolina, who beat App State, who was ranked last year. They beat South Carolina, which is incredible. I think their biggest challenge will be Duke and Clemson back to back in November. But like I mentioned, South Carolina plays this week Georgia. Georgia is carrying a 19 winning streak over South Carolina. I feel like South Carolina might come out and play. We've seen Spencer Rattler kind of rejuvenized since leaving Oklahoma and joining South Carolina. He has 3 touchdowns for 698 yards on 83.3 passing percentage. So that's pretty good. He's very accurate with the ball. He looks much better than he did at at Oklahoma. And yes, he didn't throw a touchdown, but he was very accurate against UNC in that loss. He was 30 of 39 for 353 yards, which is insane. So I definitely would watch that Georgia South Carolina game because there could be an upset. And if Georgia loses, all hell breaks loose, and this playoffs could be wide open. And I think this is a special year, yes, because this is probably the last year of the Pac-12. And I really haven't talked about it that much, but we're going to see a bunch of teams move over to the Big Ten. We're seeing a couple teams move over to the SEC after the Big 12, and the likes of Oklahoma and Texas. And then you have some teams joining the Big 12, and then you have some teams joining the Big Ten, which I mentioned. And it'll be interesting to see, yes, they're doing it from money because Pac-12 kind of messed themselves up when they went into that first deal with the Pac-12 to create that network, and they lost a lot of money. And then that was kind of like, we don't want to do that again, so let's try to move to a different conference to get more money and our television rights and things like that. And then and then I know the Pac-12 tried to make a deal with Apple TV, which fell through, and now we're seeing the extension of the Pac-12, which I'm sad because I'm an Oregon fan and I like being in that conference, but now we're gonna have to see how we do in a Power 5 school, and I think that will help Pac-12 chances when they join Power 5 school, Power 5 conference, a bigger Power 5 conference will help their chances because of the teams they play, and the competition will be slightly better. And then if they do decide to extend the playoffs to more teams, then I think it helps even better. But so wrapping up this episode, I look forward to some of the games, and I hope you guys enjoy, like, and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify, and like us and listen on Spotify, YouTube, like us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you guys soon. Hopefully we'll have a soccer one soon. Peace.